Hello, brothers, and welcome to Sigma Grandpa Channel. The hardest person to understand is sometimes the person who has quietly decided he no longer needs to be understood. Look closely at the man who seems to have nobody. No constant calls, no crowded friend group, no endless messages, no desperate need to be invited everywhere. His phone can sit untouched for hours and somehow he doesn't look bothered. But here's where things get interesting. Is he alone because nobody wants him around, or because he has become extremely selective about who gets access to him? And those are two completely different stories. Psychology has long recognized that humans need social connection. But here's the fascinating part. Having a large social network does not automatically mean having meaningful relationships. A person can be surrounded by dozens of people and still feel completely unknown. And this is where the Sigma male becomes an interesting puzzle, because sometimes his empty contact list isn't the result of rejection, it is the result of subtraction. One person gets removed after he notices manipulation. Another disappears when he realizes the friendship only works when he's useful. Someone else slowly fades away because every conversation feels like a competition. And another relationship ends because he finally asks himself a question most people are too afraid to ask. If I met this person today, knowing everything I know now, would I still choose them? That question can destroy an entire social circle. And here's the uncomfortable part. Sometimes the Sigma male is absolutely right to walk away, but sometimes he isn't, because there is a thin line between having standards and building emotional walls so high that even good people can't get through. And that is where this story gets much more complicated. Maybe having nobody isn't always proof that a man is independent. Maybe sometimes it's evidence of what he has learned, what he has tolerated, what he has discovered about people, and most importantly, what he has become afraid of repeating. So today we're going beyond the tired explanations about loving solitude and not needing validation. We're going into the uncomfortable reasons why a Sigma male can look around one day and realize that almost everyone has disappeared. And one of these reasons may reveal something about him that even he doesn't want to admit. Number one, they keep outgrowing the version of themselves people became attached to. One of the strangest reasons a Sigma male can end up with almost nobody is that he keeps changing, while the people around him keep expecting the old version to return. Maybe he used to be the funny guy who was always available. Maybe he was the one everyone called when they needed advice, money, favors, or someone to listen. But over time, his priorities change. He becomes quieter, more focused, more protective of his time. He stops explaining every decision and starts making choices based on where he is going rather than where everyone remembers him from. And that creates a problem. People often become comfortable with familiar versions of us. When we change, they may not see growth, they see rejection. They may say, "You've changed," as though change itself is a crime. But here is the brutal part. Sometimes he really has changed. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. The danger comes when he becomes so determined to escape his old identity that he starts rejecting anyone connected to it. Suddenly, childhood friends feel irrelevant, old conversations feel pointless, and familiar relationships become reminders of a person he no longer recognizes. Eventually, his circle gets smaller, not because everyone betrayed him. Sometimes, he simply stopped fitting inside the life they knew him for. Number two, they notice when relationships start becoming performances. Some relationships don't end because of one huge betrayal. They die much more quietly, when the people involved stop being genuine and start playing roles. A Sigma male may notice this earlier than most. He notices when a friend suddenly becomes nicer because they need something. He notices when conversations turn into subtle competitions. He notices when people laugh at jokes they don't find funny, praise things they don't respect, or pretend to care simply because everyone else is doing it. And once he notices the performance, something changes. He stops enjoying the relationship. The problem is that most social groups depend on a certain amount of pretending. People don't always say what they mean. They hide irritation, exaggerate excitement, fake agreement, and maintain friendships, partly because ending them would be awkward. A Sigma-type personality may eventually find that exhausting. He doesn't necessarily want everyone to be brutally honest every second. He simply wants conversations where people aren't constantly calculating what they should say next. So he starts pulling away. Others may call him antisocial, arrogant, or difficult. But from his perspective, he isn't rejecting people. He's rejecting the exhausting theater that has replaced the connection. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Once you become sensitive to fake behavior, genuine relationships can become harder to find. Because after you've noticed the mask, it's difficult to enjoy the performance again. Number 3, they notice when someone only likes their utility. One of the loneliest discoveries a Sigma male can make is realizing that someone doesn't actually miss him. They miss what he does for them. Maybe he is the problem solver everyone calls when things fall apart. Maybe he always has useful advice, money to lend, connections to offer, or the patience to listen when everyone else is tired. As long as he is providing something, the relationship feels strong. Then he stops. Suddenly, the phone becomes strangely quiet. That silence can reveal more than years of conversation ever could. He may start noticing that certain people rarely ask how he is doing unless they need a favor. They celebrate his success when it benefits them, but disappear when he needs support. They don't necessarily hate him. They simply became comfortable with what he could provide, and that realization can permanently change how he sees them. The brutally honest part is that nobody likes feeling like a human convenience store, open whenever someone needs something. So he begins withdrawing his resources. Fewer favors, fewer solutions, less availability. Not as punishment, but as an experiment. Will you still want me when I have nothing useful to offer? Some people stay, others vanish. And sometimes that disappearance hurts, but it also answers the question he was too polite to ask. Was it friendship all along, or was he simply useful? Number 4, they have a low tolerance for relationships with hidden contracts. Some relationships come with rules nobody ever says out loud. You help me, so I help you. You support my dreams, so I support yours. You listen to my problems, so I expect you to always be available for mine. You invite me, so I expect an invitation next time. At first, this can look like normal friendship, but eventually a Sigma male may notice something uncomfortable. The relationship isn't as free as it appeared. There are expectations attached to almost everything. The moment he stops meeting those expectations, the mood changes. Someone becomes distant. Another person gets offended. Suddenly he is called selfish, simply because he didn't perform his usual role. That's when the hidden contract becomes visible. He may not have a problem with helping people. What bothers him is the idea that kindness creates debt. He doesn't want every favor recorded mentally, like a transaction waiting to be collected later. This can make him extremely selective. He would rather have a relationship where two people freely choose to show up for each other than one where both sides are constantly keeping score. But there is a downside. If he becomes too suspicious of expectations, he may start seeing ordinary needs as manipulation. He can mistake healthy reciprocity for control and genuine closeness for obligation. That is where his isolation can begin. Sometimes the relationship wasn't a contract. Sometimes it was simply two people trying to care for each other. Number 5, they don't maintain relationships merely because of history. There is a strange pressure to keep people in your life simply because they have been there for a long time. Years together can create the illusion that a relationship must still be valuable. Childhood memories, old jokes, shared experiences, and difficult moments can make cutting someone off feel almost like betraying your own past. But a Sigma male may eventually ask a brutally honest question. If I met this person today, would I actually choose them? That question can change everything, because history can explain why someone entered your life. It doesn't necessarily explain why they deserve to remain there. Maybe you grew up together, but now every conversation leaves you drained. Maybe you survived difficult times together, but your values have completely separated. Maybe you were once inseparable, yet the only thing keeping the friendship alive is the sentence, "We've known each other forever." That can be a painful realization. He may decide that memories deserve respect without automatically receiving permanent access to his present. And this is where people can misunderstand him. They may call him disloyal or cold because he refuses to maintain a relationship purely out of nostalgia. But staying connected to someone isn't automatically loyalty. Sometimes it's simply habit. The uncomfortable truth is that a person can have a beautiful history with you and still be completely wrong for the life you're building now. And when the memories are the only thing holding the relationship together, eventually even the memories aren't enough. Number 6, they become difficult to manipulate. After they've studied their own weaknesses, a man becomes much harder to control when he understands exactly what makes him react. Maybe he knows he hates disappointing people. Maybe he knows criticism gets under his skin. Maybe he has a habit of rushing to fix problems because he can't stand feeling useless. Once he recognizes these weaknesses, they stop being invisible buttons that other people can casually press. That changes his relationships. Guilt trips become easier to recognize. Flattery doesn't automatically win his trust. Someone creating unnecessary drama to force a reaction becomes obvious. Even silence can lose its power when he understands that another person's withdrawal doesn't automatically mean he has done something wrong, and this can make certain people uncomfortable. Not everyone consciously manipulates others. Sometimes people simply learn what works. If being upset always makes him surrender, they'll eventually learn to get upset when they want something. If threatening to leave always makes him chase them, they'll learn that too. But once he sees the pattern, the strategy stops working. He doesn't necessarily become colder, he becomes less predictable. The catch is that self-awareness can go too far. If he starts viewing every emotional request as manipulation, he may become suspicious of people who are genuinely hurt. That's the difficult balance. Learning your weaknesses should help you protect yourself, not turn every relationship into an interrogation, because the goal isn't to become impossible to influence. It's to become conscious enough to choose when influence is deserved. Number 7, they don't give people unlimited access to their inner world. A Sigma male may talk to people regularly while revealing almost nothing that truly matters to him. That can be confusing. People may know his opinions, his jokes, his routines, even his plans, yet still have no idea what he is actually thinking or feeling. The reason is simple. He doesn't believe access should be automatic. He may have learned that once people know your deepest fears, private struggles, ambitions, weaknesses, and unfinished plans, they can start forming opinions about how you should live. Some will offer advice you never asked for. Others may use personal information during arguments. A few may even turn your vulnerabilities into weapons. So he becomes selective. He doesn't necessarily hide because he has something shameful to conceal. He simply believes privacy has value. But this creates an unexpected problem. People cannot build deep relationships with information they never receive. If he keeps every meaningful thought behind a locked door, even sincere people may eventually stop knocking. They may respect his boundaries while quietly accepting that they will never truly know him. That can leave him surrounded by acquaintances but lacking genuine intimacy. And here is the uncomfortable truth. Protecting your inner world can keep toxic people out, but it can also keep good people out. Privacy is healthy. Secrecy can become a prison. There comes a point when trust requires opening the door slightly, not for everyone, but for someone who has consistently shown they can enter without trying to take control of the room. Number 8. They sometimes leave before anyone realizes there was a problem. One of the strangest things about a Sigma male is that his final exit may look sudden to everyone else, even though it wasn't sudden to him. He may not announce every disappointment. He doesn't always argue about every irritating habit or explain every moment that damaged his trust. Instead, he watches. He remembers. He notices patterns. The first time someone crosses a boundary, he may forgive it. The second time, he pays closer attention. By the third or fourth time, he may already be emotionally stepping away. Meanwhile, the other person thinks everything is perfectly normal. That's why his eventual disappearance can feel shocking. They may say, "Why didn't you tell me there was a problem?" But from his perspective, there were signs everywhere. He simply stopped believing another conversation would change anything. This can be both his strength and his weakness. Walking away from a repeatedly unhealthy relationship can protect his peace. But leaving without giving the other person a fair chance to understand the problem can also destroy relationships that might have been repaired. Silence isn't always wisdom. Sometimes it is avoidance wearing a very convincing suit. And that distinction matters, because if he leaves every time something becomes uncomfortable, he may eventually surround himself with nobody, not because everyone failed him, but because nobody was ever given enough information to fix what was broken. Sometimes the strongest exit isn't disappearing. It's having the difficult conversation first. Number 9. Their silence can expose other people's need for constant validation. Silence can reveal things that conversation often hides. A Sigma male may not realize how much some people depend on his reactions until he stops giving them. He doesn't laugh at every joke, agree with every opinion, respond instantly to every message, or provide constant reassurance. Suddenly the other person becomes uncomfortable. Why? Because some relationships quietly depend on feedback. One person talks and the other validates. One complains and the other agrees. One tells a story and the other reacts exactly as expected. Remove that reaction and something interesting happens. The person begins questioning why the connection feels different. They may accuse him of being distant, arrogant, or unfriendly. But sometimes he hasn't changed at all. He simply stopped performing the emotional role they had become accustomed to. This can make him strangely unpopular in certain groups, not because he insults anyone or deliberately causes conflict, but because he doesn't constantly reinforce other people's sense of importance. However, there is another side to this. Silence can become a form of emotional control, too. If he deliberately withholds affection or communication just to make people chase him, he isn't demonstrating independence. He's playing the same validation game from the opposite direction. Real confidence doesn't require making everyone else uncomfortable. The healthiest version of this trait is simple. He doesn't need constant applause, and he doesn't provide it merely to keep people happy. That can shrink his circle dramatically. But the people who remain don't need him to clap every time they walk into the room. Number 10. They can become too honest with themselves to keep certain people around. Self-awareness can be uncomfortable because it removes excuses. A Sigma male may eventually realize that some relationships in his life aren't there because of genuine connection. They're there because of fear, habit, loneliness, convenience, or the simple discomfort of starting over. That realization can be brutal. He may ask himself, Do I actually enjoy this person's company, or am I just afraid of having nobody? Once that question is answered honestly, certain relationships become impossible to maintain. Maybe he keeps answering calls because he doesn't want to feel alone. Maybe he tolerates disrespect because the friendship is old. Maybe he stays around someone because leaving would force him to admit that years of emotional investment produced very little. Self-honesty removes the comfortable excuses, and once he sees a relationship clearly, pretending becomes exhausting. This is one reason his circle can become unusually small. He isn't necessarily searching for perfect people. He's simply becoming less willing to lie to himself about why someone is still there. But there is a dangerous edge to this kind of honesty. A man can become so focused on identifying unhealthy relationships that he starts examining every relationship for reasons to leave. Every disagreement becomes a warning sign. Every flaw becomes evidence. Every imperfect moment becomes a reason to withdraw. That's not self-awareness anymore. That's emotional overcorrection. The real strength is knowing when a relationship genuinely needs to end, and when two imperfect people simply need patience, forgiveness, and an honest conversation. Number 11, they have a strange relationship with being needed. Being needed feels good. It can make a man feel important, respected, even powerful. But for a Sigma male, there may come a point where being needed starts feeling less like appreciation and more like a trap. He notices when people only call because they need something fixed. He becomes the emergency contact, the problem solver, the person expected to have answers. At first, he may enjoy being useful. Then he starts asking a more uncomfortable question. Would these people still choose me if they didn't need anything from me? That question changes the relationship. He may deliberately stop becoming indispensable. He won't always rush in. He won't solve every problem. He won't allow someone else's lack of preparation to become his emergency. Some people won't like that. They may accuse him of becoming selfish because he stopped carrying responsibilities that were never truly his. But there is another side that deserves honesty. A man can become so determined not to be needed that he refuses to let anyone depend on him at all. He may confuse independence with emotional distance. He may reject genuine requests for support simply because he fears becoming trapped. That's where the balance matters. Healthy relationships aren't supposed to be built entirely on dependency, but they aren't built on complete self-sufficiency either. Sometimes love means being useful to someone without becoming responsible for their entire life. The goal isn't to be needed by everyone. It's to be freely chosen by people who would still value you even when they don't need anything from you. Number 12, they don't always realize how intimidating their emotional withdrawal looks. A Sigma male may believe he is simply taking a step back, but other people may experience it as a complete emotional shutdown. He stops talking as much. His replies become shorter. He no longer explains what bothers him. He doesn't argue, complain, or demand an apology. From his perspective, he is simply protecting his peace. But silence sends a message whether he intends it to or not. The people around him may start wondering what happened. Is he angry? Disappointed? Finished with the relationship? Waiting for someone to make the first move? The uncertainty can make people nervous because they have no idea where they stand. And that's where his withdrawal can become intimidating. He may not raise his voice or make threats. He doesn't have to. His sudden emotional distance can communicate finality more strongly than an argument ever could. But there is a flaw in this approach. People aren't mind readers. If he never explains what caused the withdrawal, someone who genuinely cares about him may be left trying to solve a mystery they didn't create. Eventually, they may stop trying. And this can create a painful cycle. He withdraws because he feels misunderstood, while others withdraw because they feel shut out. His silence protects him from conflict, but it can also prevent resolution. Sometimes emotional distance is necessary. But if every disappointment ends with disappearing, he may eventually teach even good people that the safest way to love him is from a distance. Conclusion. Maybe the real reason a Sigma male has nobody in his life isn't as simple as being independent, antisocial, or too different for everyone else. Sometimes people leave because they were only interested in what he could provide. Sometimes he walks away because he recognizes patterns that can no longer be ignored. Sometimes he outgrows people he once loved. And sometimes, brutally enough, he is the one pushing good people away without realizing it. Because there is a difference between protecting your peace and protecting your walls. A smaller circle isn't automatically a sign of strength. Having nobody isn't automatically proof that you have higher standards. And being alone doesn't automatically mean you're wiser than the people around you. Real strength is being able to recognize fake relationships without becoming incapable of trusting genuine ones. It's knowing when to walk away without becoming addicted to leaving. It's protecting your privacy without hiding your entire heart. It's refusing to be used without refusing to be loved. And perhaps most importantly, it's understanding that independence was never supposed to mean emotional exile. The strongest man isn't necessarily the one who can live without everyone. Sometimes, he's the man who can stand perfectly well on his own, but still has the courage to let the right people stand beside him. So if any of these points made you look at solitude, friendship, or your own relationships differently, don't just keep the thought to yourself. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. And before you leave, ask yourself one final question. Are you alone because nobody deserves access to you, or because you've become so good at closing the door that even the right people can't get in?